Today's episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity
and by pelvic health professionals. Every single yoga student that you meet up with has a pelvis. They also have a pelvic floor, and many of those yoga students are dealing with some type of pelvic health issue at some point in their life, and often they are not talking about it with their yoga teachers and even their healthcare professionals. But we know that yoga combined with pelvic health awareness and education is such a powerful tool that can help those students. If you would like to be connected with worldwide pelvic health experts and learn the most up-to-date information, make sure to check out pelvichealthprofessionals.com. And because you are a podcast listener, I have a gift for you. Use the coupon code CONNECTED2021 to get a month of free access. This coupon is valid until the end of 2021. So if you're listening in real time, we are in December of 2021 now. And you can use this code all the way up until the end of this month and get a free month of access and join all of our live calls for that month and check out our vast library of information. Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I use she, her pronouns. I am a Canadian who is learning more and more about what it means when you live on Indigenous land. Because all of my ancestors came here as immigrants from Ireland, England, Scotland, and Germany. This podcast is being recorded on Anishinaabe, Odawa, and Mississauga land. And I want to share one resource. I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast yet. I am reading the book Braiding Sweetgrass. I feel like about 7 friends told me to read this, and wow, I really understand why now that I'm actually listening to the audiobook version, and I am loving it. I'm loving it as I go out for my morning walks. It really connects me with so many concepts. If you've read this book, let me know. And maybe you decide to read it from listening today. It's really helping me to connect with different Indigenous stories and wisdom. It's quite profound. I'm also a mom of 3, a yoga teacher, podcaster, and founder of Pelvic Health Professionals. And a random fact about me, because I've been trying to share one each and every week on the podcast for a while, is that I love to talk about politics. I know it is on the list of things to not talk about, but I grew up where talking about social issues and politics was encouraged, and so was healthy debate. I definitely can trace where this started from. My dad is the same way, and his dad, who recently passed away this year, my grandpa, who I was very close with, they both love to find someone to debate with and talk about politics, and it's not something that ever was personal. Even though I know that some people listening in on my grandpa and I talking or my dad and I talking might start to feel uncomfortable, like, oh my gosh, these people have different political opinions. But I was really raised that this is okay, that it is natural, and it's really good to question the people who are leading our country, leading our communities, really making the decisions and the policies out there. It's okay to question them, and it's okay to disagree with them. So if you ever want to talk politics, I'm here for it. If you're up for questioning, wondering about things and healthy debates. Also, my children who are growing into young adults right now, my youngest is almost 17. My kids think it is hilarious when people who are running for local politics decide to stop by our house and talk about their policies and their ideas, because my kids know these poor people have no idea what's coming at them, which is a pile of questions. Okay, so let's dive in today, because this podcast has nothing to do with politics today, although my guest and I did at one point do a podcast talking all about politics. So I love how that ties in. But this podcast was created for you, because I know that each and every week you are out there sharing the yoga, you are out there driving to classes, planning classes, learning more, sharing with your students, and I wanted a place where you can feel connected to information and inspiration that will support you as you're doing all of this and building a business. If you have been listening to the podcast for a while, you might know that one of my favorite things to talk about is finding your niche as a yoga teacher. And your niche can be anything, a specific lineage of yoga, or it could be catered to people with specific needs or teaching to a specific age group. In this episode today, we're exploring a niche that not a lot of yoga teachers focus on, yoga for older grownups. Now, I want to tell you before we get into this amazing topic with such a beautiful guest that I did this interview with Maria Kirsten way back in January of 2021. And we're getting ready to close out the year here of 2021. And a lot has happened. And actually, very unfortunately, in April, Maria passed away. Anyone who ever had the privilege to meet Maria or spend time with her or be connected with her in any way knows that she held such an amazing energy and such an excitement for yoga and how it can help people to stay mobile, to stay able to move in their daily life, do what they want to do, and also to really help people with mental health. I really hesitated to go back and listen to this audio because I was missing Maria a lot. We had just started to connect, I felt like, in the last year or 2 years. And as podcasters and as yoga teachers and as people who like to dig in and really question things and discuss things, Shara, Maria's co-host on the Live Like You Love Yourself podcast, Maria and myself, so Shara, Maria, and myself, we all talked about having a continued conversation. We talked about meeting up more often. And when Maria passed away, I just really felt not only the loss of like what our entire yoga community had lost because she's such a beacon of wisdom, but also this personal loss of I was just starting to connect with a really great friend, and all of a sudden that shifted. So I've been holding on to this audio for quite a while, and I didn't want to listen to it for a while because it felt like there had been a lot of grief and loss in my life, which I talked about a while back on the episode that we did with Jacoby Ballard. But I want to tell you also that in listening back to this audio, oh my gosh, what an amazing gift to hear Maria's voice, to hear her wisdom. And I really felt like this interview was so valuable in understanding what teaching yoga to older grownups can be like. And even just the fact that Maria named her class Yoga for Older Grownups, I can't wait until you hear all about that. And that is why I really am excited that you get to listen to today's episode with Maria. I hope that if you are a friend of hers, or if you're her family, or if you ever met up with her or heard her on a previous podcast somewhere or followed her work, that this episode will give you some comfort. If you have never heard of Maria before, she was a yoga therapist working mainly with pain and mental health and offered yoga classes to grown-ups and older grown-ups in her community. She also taught teacher trainings and supporting older grown-ups and general mental health. And for Maria, the focus was always on intelligent movement that reconnects people to the joy of being alive in their bodies and helping people connect with the intuitive wisdom of the body and nurturing their innate capacity to heal through simple, joyful movement. Maria and I talked about what words can be triggering for older grown-ups and my own mistake in asking about a quote-unquote yoga for seniors class name. This was way back. I actually did a podcast on it, but you'll hear me bring it up and I'll link to those in our show notes. And we also talked about some of the health conditions to be aware of when teaching to this age group of people. Maria addresses the fear and caution that some yoga teachers might feel when teaching to older bodies, or as my friend Barb says, bodies with more experience on this earth. And she touches on how yoga can have a mental health benefit for older people as well. Maria also has some advice on things to avoid in a yoga class with this age group and shares how yoga has helped her in her own journey with cancer. So Maria does get into talking about her cancer journey when we spoke back in January of 2021. I learned so much from this interview with Maria, and I wanted to share her wisdom and her experience with all of you today. Now, before we dive in and get to hear from Maria and learn about how to teach yoga for older grownups, let's first hear from our sponsor, Schedulicity.
Hey Connected Yoga teachers, this is Katie with a Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. Gentle and restorative yoga can be such a fantastic addition to so many different lifestyles. Client tags and Schedulicity can help you market the same class in different ways to appeal to different lifestyles. Tag your clients as athletes and let them know that your restorative classes offer excellent support for overworked joints. Tag your clients as seniors and send them a message about the ways that these easy movements can help improve cardiovascular health and reduce the risk of falling. For students dealing with injury or emotional turmoil, you can invite them to see how this yoga practice can enhance recovery, aid with grieving, or brighten mood and outlook. The best part of these tags is that they are private, so your clients will never know if you tag them as seniors or athletes. We'll just keep that between us.
Thank you so much, Team Schedulicity, for really helping our yoga teachers out. And speaking of helping our yoga teachers out, Schedulicity has a coupon code. If you have not used it yet, you can get 2 months of free access, whether you are using Schedulicity right now or if you're thinking about trying it out. The coupon code is CYT, 2 months. And if you forget that, if you're on the go, you can always come back to our show notes. Today's show notes are at theconnectedyogateacher.com/249. Or if you search for the term grownups, I am sure you will find this episode. Also in the show notes, I will link back to any previous podcast episodes that I did with Shara and Maria over on their podcast or that we did here on this podcast. I also want to give a shout out to Stephanie Maxwell, who sent an email and I asked for permission to share this part of the email. Stephanie says, "Hi Shannon, I wanted to let you know that I'm hosting my very first Yoga for Pelvic Health workshop in November with Natasha from Little Hive Yoga here in Manitoba. I was really inspired by your teachings from the pelvic health training, all of the information you presented, plus my background in yoga and pelvic floor gave me the confidence to do this. Thanks for putting stellar education together, Stephanie." So this is again from Stephanie Maxwell of The Pregnant Pelvis. That's at thepregnantpelvis.net. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for sending this feedback. I am so excited that the Yoga for Pelvic Health training helped you and supported you, and I'm so excited to hear how did the workshop go. I'm really curious to hear that, and I love that you're a fellow Canadian, so shout out to all of our listeners from Manitoba. If you are a listener who wants to learn more about Yoga for Pelvic Health, there is a 20-hour online training. It's an on-demand training. It was done live, and that's the one that Stephanie is talking about. I'll make sure to link to it in our show notes. As a regular podcast listener, have you left us a review yet? It makes a big difference. It actually helps us to reach more yoga teachers and have more of an impact. So it means a lot if you do take the time to leave us a review. And you can go to the show notes page of any podcast and see the button to leave a review right at the top. And I try and read them on the podcast. So if you leave one, you might hear me give a shout out of thank you to you on the podcast. Make sure to leave me your name and possibly where you teach and what your yoga business is called. Alrighty, let's dive right in and get into today's podcast episode with Maria Kirsten, learning about teaching yoga to older grownups. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Maria. It's great to have you here today.
I'm thrilled to be here. I love being here with you.
I know. I feel like this is your third time on the podcast, which would be a record, but truthfully, this is your second time, but we did play an interview, so it could be second or third. I feel like you're breaking a record anyway.
Anyway, I just kind of fell in love with you the first time we had a conversation, and I've so enjoyed the friendship that's followed. So it's very exciting to be here. Really fun.
Aw, I feel the same way.
Mm.
Do you have birds in your house or are those birds outside?
No, that is my birds around my house. Yeah, lots of birds in Australia. It's funny, I've got noise canceling earphones on, so I haven't heard any of the surrounding sounds.
Right.
But yeah, we have a lot of birds.
Well, it's so nice to hear them. But I was like, now I have to ask if you have birds in your house.
Yeah, no, I'm not a bird in the house person, but
well, you don't need to be. You have them singing in your house.
Yeah, they're all over the place, and sometimes I wish we'd had a kookaburra because that's extra special. But we sometimes get them going off. It's a bit later in the morning for them. They like to wake you up at 5.
Oh wow! So I am excited that today we're going to chat about yoga for grownups. First of all, how did you come up with this name of calling it yoga for grownups?
It was so hard to try to find what I was doing. You know, there's all those like vinyasa flow classes and all this sort of fast stuff and pose-oriented stuff. And I really wanted to try to find some way to express that I was doing yoga that empowered people to take care of themselves and that was about the person, not the poses and the practices necessarily. So it took a long time, and actually one of my students came up with it. What I love about it is that it's funny, kind of. I mean, not everybody thinks it's funny, but most people, if I say my email, they giggle. You know, Maria@yogaforgrownups.com. They have a little giggle, and I'm thrilled because grownups is the kids' word for adults, and yoga for adults. You can get some very kind of pornographic things, so don't look that up. But
right,
but I just tried to captivate people feeling empowered and doing something sustainable. So I guess it also relates to the householder phase of life where you are preserving energy. You're hugely demanded upon, and you don't have the time to risk an injury because you did some stupid handstand thing or, you can do a stupid handstand, but something beyond for no reason. And that was what I tried to capture.
Right. Oh, I love it.
And then I've gone on. After I did my OT training, then I now teach a class and a training for yoga for older grownups.
And so this is what makes me curious, like, what is the age of grownups versus older grownups? Does anyone ask you that question?
No, it's a kind of you decide, because grownups, I have everything from teenagers who are doing, their final exams to mothers who are exhausted to, retirees who are in their 60s and 70s. And then older grownups, I wasn't sure what the response would be. I was like, okay, well, let's see. But what I wanted to signal was that it was going to be safe and that it was going to be, no one was going to be asked to do something that they couldn't do or anything. And I thought it would be a dud. And I put it on normally I'd been teaching on this Tuesday morning, and it had been kind of quiet when I was just teaching regular grownups. As soon as I put older grownups, all these people came in and they were like, is this for older grownups? And it was like a covenant with them that I wasn't going to make them do something that was beyond them. And they understood that. Yeah. I was amazed because I thought everyone would run for the hills. They didn't.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was just a focus on what older people need. So if you think you're an older grown-up, then I think you've acknowledged that you're losing a little bit of your confidence. You don't feel that strong. You are worried about your balance or your mobility, things like that. A lot of it is mental. It's a loss of confidence.
Right. And so what do you usually teach in those classes, or what do those classes look like, those yoga for older grownups classes?
Yeah, they're a bit different from grownups, but not that different. But I shortened the class to an hour, and then I lengthened it again to an hour and 15 minutes because I realized that older people get tired quicker. Mm-hmm. That's long enough. And we focus on, there's always a warm-up. We start lying down, we warm up hips and feet and stuff like that. And then we'll have a theme for the day. So then we're either working on feet, or we're working on balance, or we're working on our glute medius, or we're doing mobility, I like to call it, rather than flexibility. So we've got strength through range, kind of transferring. Sometimes we'll do we're going to get up from the floor to a chair to standing, things like that, or lunging to get up. So I'll have some kind of a theme and run it through. And then we come down and we do a relax. And then that 15 minutes I added was really just to say, Maria, you need to give them 15 minutes of relaxation. And so they really got a decent Shavasana rather than a tacked on kind of, okay, here you go.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. I think this is so key to look at this. I think you called it transfer, like where they transition from sitting to standing or down on the floor. This is something that I think we take for granted when we're younger. And I've worked with different bodies who, our main goal was, I remember this one woman who said, I just want to be able to walk my dog. And if I fall over, I want to be able to get up. I mean, that's very important.
Huge. And the thing is the biggest risk for falling is fear of falling. Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
So if you're afraid to fall, then you move in a really tentative way. So then you're going to fall. So it's about that confidence of feeling like, okay, if I fall, I can get up. I can kind of roll into it. I get down and up all the time, so I can do this.
Right.
So, yeah.
It makes sense. When I had my back injury, I noticed that I was taking smaller steps and looking down, and my PT noticed it because it was hurting when I walked. And she said, Shannon, if you were 85, fine, maybe we would look down a little bit more, but nope, no more looking down. And she said, I think you're afraid to fall, and I want you to walk like it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right. That's why I'm really glad I'm not really an OT. I do a few clients being an occupational therapist, but I just love yoga therapy, really. But what it taught me was the importance of those things. And I've just had surgery and been in hospital for a week, and bed mobility, like how do you roll over when you've got an injury or something painful? How do you roll over, swing your legs down and get out of bed? How do you stand up? How do you make your way? How do you get down on the toilet? It's really, really important. And when you've got a sore leg, like what do you do to, it's called spare that leg. So you can put the injured leg a little further forward, that foot a little further forward, and the good leg a little further back. Then you're using that leg. And then later when you need to strengthen it, you swap that. But little things like that make a big difference. And the thing that really distinguishes, although I do that all through my classes, is I teach people about it. So I'm not just doing it with them. I'm giving them all the knowledge around it and all the education around it so they really understand what's going on. And the students have said that's kind of the number one compliment that I get, is that they love it because they understand what's happening in their bodies and what they're doing.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what are some of the things that you share with your students?
Oh, okay. I mean, we wouldn't do anything without explaining why. So say there's a warm-up, and a classic kind of warm-up, we'll lie down, we'll kind of hug our knees and circle and stuff. And then say we're doing feet. So I'll talk to them about how many bones they have in their feet, how the feet are designed. So doing a bit of anatomy. This is all while they're, warming their feet up or using some straps to get some movement. So say we put a strap around their foot. So you put one loop around your foot, and then you've got two straps hanging down. And we work on eversion and inversion. So when the sole of the foot, it's like you shorten your inner ankle and lengthen your outer ankle, and then the other way. And a lot of people don't even know that that's an important movement. And then they realize how restricted they are. And then we come up and we're like, hey, look what happens when you walk, how you land, how you roll through your foot, and you need that eversion, inversion, and how the landing is a kind of shock absorber, and how the leaving your foot behind is a thrusting, and you need all of those components. And then we go into calves and how if your calf is tight, you can't get up off the floor, and you also thump downstairs. So they're like, oh, I think I might do a calf stretch every day.
Yeah.
Rather than just doing a calf stretch once in class and they're like, yeah, we did a calf stretch. They're like, this stuff's important. And they kind of get motivated. They understand why it's important. So.
Oh, that is so good. I love how you took this movement and then you're like, and this is how it's incorporated into walking. Like that's so key. Oh, I love it.
Because everybody walks. We walk anyway to get from here to there, but a lot of people walk for exercise. Mm-hmm. So if you walk for exercise and you're walking wrong, or you're walking with really tight calves, someone has to make up for your tight calves. So it's going to be into your knees. It's going to be into your hips. It'll be up into your lower back. So who's going to pay is really the question, So, who's been a huge inspiration is her name Katie Bowman?
Oh, yeah. Katie Bowman. Yes.
Oh, Dynamic Aging. What an amazing book. And just what an amazing woman. Her work is fantastic. I just love everything. She has so much work with feet. So if anybody needs a resource on that of how to work with feet. And, then I do that with older grownups and I'm like, well, all my grownups need it. Everybody needs this.
Right.
So it's funny how the older grownups just kind of bleeds into the grownups. It just is, we can do a few more dynamic things. We do dynamic things in older grownups too. It's just a matter of reading the audience and seeing if they're up for things.
Yeah.
And scaffolding. So you don't ever just dive into the Warrior 3. We'll play with Warrior 3 and how to shift your weight onto that front foot. And then you might have a chair with your hands on a chair and things like that. I use chairs a lot in that class. It's the best prop ever to raise the floor and to give a sense of security.
Now, clarify when you say you use chairs a lot. I think some yoga teachers get confused at this point that they think that everyone's sitting in a chair the whole time.
No. In fact, if we're sitting, we're getting out of the chair. So the only time we really sit, I might teach people to sit. People do not know how to sit.
Right.
And I got so annoyed. I'd go to that many yoga workshops and everyone's like, take a comfortable seat. It's like standing at the edge of the cliff and being like, have a nice flight, off you go. And nobody really understands. And then if there you are cross-legged, but you can't do that. Your knees are killing you. What are your options for sitting? And then in a chair, people sit. So how do you sit properly? Because a lot of people, they sit with their back. They get in the chair, put their feet on the floor, and then they shove their back forward. They squeeze their kidneys forward. And what you really want to do is let your pelvis roll a little bit anterior using your hip flexors. So it's a little like if you imagine your feet glued to the floor, you're trying to lift your legs out of that glue. Can you feel how that rolls your pelvis forward and kind of deepens your groins and spreads your little butt back? But it doesn't harden your back and kind of squeeze your kidneys and really hurt your back. That kind of thing. So that's what we do in a chair. And then we get the hell out of the chair. We do sit to stand, which is sit to stand is such a great exercise because it's basically Utkatasana. It's also the movement pattern for Uttanasana.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you can do that, then we go almost sit in the chair. So you just sit almost on it. I have a lot of fun with chairs.
I love that.
They're a great prop also just to hold on to or to even put the back of your fingernails when you're standing or balancing. If you have something to touch, it helps with your proprioceptive, part of your balance. So,
yeah, that's fascinating. In my yoga for pelvic health classes, I would always go over sit to stand and stand to sit, especially for people who have dealt with pelvic pain, sometimes pelvic organ prolapse, or, anything that has to do with the pelvis, even low back pain, because you'll see those people go to sit and they kind of curl.
Yeah.
And so we go over the sitting and and allowing the pelvic floor to release, relax, allow the sits bones to spread out. So I'm going to add your cues in now. I'm excited about this.
The other thing people do when they go to stand up is they just use their legs, but they're letting their belly fall out the front.
Right.
So all of the abdominal organs that are your core are hanging in a kind of saggy bag in front of you. And it's you need to know, how can I hold that bag of organs in against my spine to create spaciousness without stopping breathing, without being so tight in my pelvic floor. And the best thing you can cue the pelvic floor. If you just tip the tip of your tail without moving your whole pelvis, you tip the tip of your tail forward and up, you'll get pelvic floor and transverse abdominis a little bit, if you can feel that. But a lot of people are like, what? So then this friend of mine said, I can't do that. I think she said some pelvic trauma or whatever the story was. I don't remember the story, but she uses what she called a clip lock. So if you put your finger on just above your pubic bone, and then a finger on the base of your sternum, and without moving, imagine trying to bring those two together. So you're just slightly switching on rectus abdominis, And then you have this little like seat belt that you've just gone clip, and that holds the bag of organs in, and you turn that seat belt down as low as you can. And that helps you not let your organs all fall out on the floor.
Oh, that's amazing.
So that's been enormously helpful.
It's so cool to geek out on these cues. I use an S breath and what I call claw fingers. And
Oh, tell me what those are. Please.
It's like you make your tiger claws with your hands and place them onto the thighs from sitting. And as you come to stand on an exhale, then you make this S sound out through the mouth, which engages the transversus abdominis muscles.
Oh, of course. Yes. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And what are the claws for?
I'm not certain how that all fits in, but it's something to do with like it also tells the core to engage.
Yeah, that's right. You can't do that without perking up.
Yeah.
Cool.
And one person I shared this with, she said to me, okay, I feel like I've gotten my money's worth, and we just started. Like she said, every time she would sit to stand, it would be painful until we did that. So these types of things really make a big difference. Are there things that you do not do with this age group, these older grown-ups?
Yes. We don't do a lot of vinyasa flow. We might do a salute to the sun, but we would do it quite slowly. And then we might repeat it, and then I'll give them their own breath to do it. So in like a Krishnamacharya style, where they're moving to their own breath cues. But we will have gone through each step of that salute so that they know how to get into it comfortably and kind of transition into it comfortably and move out of it. But in terms of like this to this to this to this, no.
Right.
I'd rather do repeating the same pose. So it's very much kind of coming off that Krishnamacharya style yoga, but it gives the motor system a chance to kind of repeat the pattern and find the correct initiation. And if you can find that, well, then you can move on. And I might say, okay, so say, let me give an example. Maybe we're going to play with half moon, and we're going to play with it in the middle of the room, which is really difficult. But I'll give them a block, and I'll say, you put your block on your right hand, you put your right foot forward. And I'm like, great. So now breathe in and then bend your right knee. And as you exhale, put your block down on the floor and let your left leg lift. And then pick your block up and come back up to standing. So we're just putting the block down and lifting it up, which is a handy thing to know how to do. Kind of pick something up. And then if that feels good and the kind of the bounce, they can find the rebound in their knee, well, then they could maybe stay there a little bit, or they could start to open their pelvis out to the side a little bit and then come back down. And so we go like that, like edge by edge. And then I'll say, now, if you want to move to the wall, go ahead and move to the wall and do that on the wall, or stay or keep going. But I make sure that just putting your block down and picking it up, you've already like got an A. You're there.
Right.
And then the rest of it's kind of show pony tricks. And if you want to do that, that's fine, but don't fall over and hurt yourself. So there's the pressure off kind of thing.
Oh, I love it. Building up like baby steps to those poses to wherever they want to go.
Yeah. And strong inversions I don't do. So at the end of the kind of dynamic part, the standing part, I'll come back down and say, now do something upside down. And that's relaxing. So the purpose of that is that they choose an inversion, which could be bridge with their bum on a block, or it could be like a little bridge supported Viparita Karani mudra, or legs up the wall. And if somebody has shoulder stand in their practice, and sometimes we work on it, I'll like make it so we start to approach something like that, really slowly at the wall. But if someone has that in their repertoire, you go ahead. But I'll always point out that if you're going to jump into something like that and you're teetering around and you haven't got the strength, then you're not doing what I'm asking, which is being upside down and relaxed.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, because I think, headstand and things like that for people who've never practiced it would be dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot else I don't do.
Okay. I like that. It sounds like you build a lot of strength and empower people, let's try this in different ways.
The thing is not to be scared of older people. If you give them the education and tell them what you're doing and why, then they have the choice. They can make educated choices about, what options they'll take or when they'll rest. And then they feel really empowered. Like they're not stupid. They're really bright. It's just that, some of their experiences have been disempowering. And so they lose their confidence. And it's all about empowerment. And it's really all about using the yoga that we're doing, whether that's asana or pranayama or meditation, to teach them about themselves.
Right.
That's ultimately what we're doing, is cultivating a relationship with ourselves. So that's the goal.
You just reminded me of when I was a very new teacher. So I was in my 20s, and there was a woman who came to my class, and she was in her 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And she could only sit in the chair the whole time. And I remember thinking so many classes, oh, I hope she's getting something out of this. And then she passed away, and her children sent me a note saying, like, she loved your classes so much. She said she was in her 90s when she finally learned how to breathe.
That's beautiful.
It's like the sweetest note. Yeah.
Oh, isn't that, things like that, honestly, they fill your heart forever. That is just beautiful. You see, that makes you realize that don't underestimate what people are getting.
So true.
Ask them if they need anything. But if you ask them if they need anything and you give them the education enough to choose options, they're happy if they're sitting in a chair because they feel safe and they feel they can participate. She's not sitting at home. She's out in the world, joining in with this group, vibing off a beautiful teacher, So.
Yeah. Is there anything that yoga teachers ask you about teaching yoga for older grownups? Or is there anything that you think, oh, this is something that I've learned along the way?
Yeah, I think what people really worry about is that they need to know everything about aging and all the conditions of aging. And, it's like they need to know like an encyclopedic list of what is wrong with older people. One of my favorite books that I read is Atul Gawande, Being Mortal, about aging. And he basically made the point that if you take your average 85-year-old, they're going to have stuff wrong with them, most of them. They'll have a bit wrong with them. They'll have a bit of arthritis. They might have, diabetes or high blood pressure, but they're cracking on with those things. And so we build in and we, give them options around it, but they're actually doing okay. And so we don't need to get all terrified. And I think we don't even need to know all about those things. I suppose you need to know some principles. Someone has high blood pressure, give them some options and make sure they're comfortable when you do something a little bit upside down. But I think there's this terror of not knowing enough. What is her name? Wildcroft. Her last name is Wildcroft. And she works with people with disabilities. And this woman with a very disabled son said, I'd like you to work with my son. And she said, but I don't have any training. And the woman said, good, you'll just meet him and you guys will work it out together. Mm-hmm. I just think that's what you do. You meet the person and you offer things, and then you say, look, if you're uncomfortable, let's figure out what else you need to do this, to make it accessible. So
that is so powerful. I feel like this teacher that you're talking about, their name starts with a T.
Theo.
I was
there we go.
It's on the tip of my tongue. Yeah,
she writes a blog and it's interesting. And Jay Brown did a good interview with her on his podcast.
Yes. Oh, I love this. To not be afraid. So you talked about the conditions that maybe, what does my friend Barb call it? A body with more experience on this earth. That's what she calls an older body.
That's right.
What are the conditions that, here's a question I have. We know, or I know in many of my classes, I focus on yoga for pelvic health. So I always talk about urinary incontinence for men and women and everyone. Are there some topics that come up, some conditions that come up, or do you try and just avoid talking about that in a yoga class?
No, like I talk about arthritis and what it is and how it works and how to, that basically your joints like drain of liquid quicker than they should. And so you eventually have kind of not bone on bone, because that's terrible language, but you've got less cushioning, which means you need to rest more. So the thing about arthritis in preventing it, and really the thing about life, is how much should you do to stay strong and be getting there without overdoing and injuring and getting too much? And then how much resting should you do to stay relaxed and juicy and healing without losing condition, deconditioning. And so only that person can know that. But once they're given permission to, break things up. Like OTs would tell you if you do cleaning and you're going to sore back. So don't clean the whole house all on the same day. I have one of those stupid expensive vacuum cleaners, but it only goes for 10 minutes or something, and my husband and I love it. I could do my bedroom and my bathroom and something out in the living room, and then it cacks itself and needs more power. And it's so great because you don't vacuum for the whole house for ages and get a sore back and whatever. You come back and you do it later. And so knowing how to pace yourself. So these are the things that come up. So I talk about arthritis and about pacing and about knowing when to rest and knowing when to strengthen. And you've got to do both, but only you know when enough is enough or too much is too much. And then other things, definitely incontinence. And boy, do people listen then. We talk about that. And we talk about balance.
What about brain health?
I talk about, trying to fight Alzheimer's kind of thing.
Right.
And I'll often say, if I give complex instructions or we're doing something, I'm like, here it is, folks. If your brain is burning a little, that's good. That's us fighting back through it. But I also say, and this is like a huge, especially for what's happened to me, like, you're going along, you're a yoga teacher, you're an international yoga teacher and da-di-da, and then you get cancer. Boom. Like you get T-boned at an intersection. It's like everybody doesn't know what's coming. And you need to have a bag of resources ready. And so you're not doing your yoga practice. You're doing it now, but it's going to help you so much when the poop hits the fan. And it has helped my students so much. So there's that's why I do like the mobility stuff and the, getting out of bed and getting out of chairs and things like that. But it's also about, brain health. If you have a habit of doing yoga and you have a little practice that you do at home, then you'll be able to do that even when you're dementing. It's something that's there and you kind of logged it in and it's become such a pattern. You'll keep those things where you're not going to learn something new as that happens.
Right.
And that's hard. And then it's also there for mental health because we also don't know when we're, going to have COVID and God knows what happens. And when you're going to feel a little down or a little low or a little anxious. And what tools do you have to make yourself feel better, to watch your mind and know that, hang on, my mind is all over the place, but I'm actually still here and I'm actually okay in this moment. So those two parts of brain health. I talk about mental health all the time, all the time. Because everybody has it.
Yeah.
Everybody to whatever degree, wherever they are on the spectrum of it. And they like it. My students love it.
I bet.
Yeah. Because, I don't know, nobody talks about mental health enough. I think there's a kind of cursory service to it, but not enough about like, well, what do you actually do if you feel really anxious? Or
right.
What do you do if you feel depressed? So, yeah.
Now, I know that your situation might be different. You have recently had surgery. Thank you for sharing that with us, that you had this like rare form of cancer, you said, in your femoral artery.
Yeah, I have epithelial hemangioendothelioma, and I had it in my femoral artery. So they had to chop that out, and they chopped out my sartorius, 2 veins, and a nerve as well, which is fine. It's like a sensory nerve. So I just have kind of, my skin doesn't feel on that part of the leg. And then they took my greater saphenous vein from my right side, turned it around so the valves don't get in the way, and they made it into an artery.
That's amazing.
And I just had it checked yesterday, and it's working beautifully. So
that's amazing. So I know that you've had some time off, or I'm guessing you've had time off teaching for that. And you're also in Australia, and I feel like your restrictions for COVID are different there. But my question, and I'm not sure if it applies, are your older grown-ups, are they doing online yoga right now?
No. So, they're working with my beautiful teacher, Kanako Yajima, who's a colleague of mine who takes my classes when I'm traveling. And so she jumps in and it's just like a seamless continuation. Nice. They might miss me a little bit. But
yeah, I'm sure they will.
But they're saying they miss me a little bit. But she gives them a great class. I know, like, they're doing great. I'm so lucky to have that. She just said, I'll do it for as long as you need it. You just tell me. And when I can, when I feel a little more secure in the world, I've got some tests to get through, and then I'll kind of be able to plan a little bit. I will go and see if I can actually talk through a class, not necessarily move through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a few online teaching things, and I've got my Yoga for Mental Health course, and I just filmed my Yoga for Older Grownups course for teachers, and I'm going to put those out. So that's kind of the extent of my plans.
Hey, connected yoga teachers, I just wanted to pop in here real quick and update you that I went to Maria's website and looked at the Education for Yoga Teachers tab, and there's a note there that says, Maria Kirsten passed away in April 2021. Her wish was for her teaching to continue to be available to inspire and help people to feel more comfortable, happy, and well in their bodies and minds. We are currently working on making her online courses ongoingly available. Please stay tuned for updates, and please join Maria's mailing list if you're interested in taking one of her online courses in Yoga for Older Grownups and Seniors or Yoga for Mental Health. So if you are interested in future updates about Maria's online offerings, that's definitely the place to go. And I signed up, and I was so excited and so grateful to receive a guided video practice with Maria. So that was really nice to receive. So I'm thinking, where are your students meeting? Do you have restrictions, and can you meet in person, or are they on Zoom?
Oh, no, we can meet. We can have 20 people. And so
Wow.
that's heaps. That's fine.
It's like a different world that you're living.
Oh, yeah. No, Australia, we're so lucky because we were a little bit behind. You know, things happen first in the States and Europe, and we were like, shut down the borders. So our borders are shut down. You can't enter this country without doing 2 weeks of quarantine. And if there are cases, and of course there are cases, so most of the cases are in quarantine, but then occasionally we'll have some community transmission that kind of comes. So there is some virus in the community, and immediately they just either shut down that area, or they say, you know, they announce all the different places that you need to go. If you've been to, you know, this grocery store in this area in these dates, you need to go and get tested and isolate. And so they just put out these little spot fires, and occasionally they'll shut something down. Like they shut Brisbane down for 3 days because they had somebody with that, you know, that new variant around, and they just shut everyone down for 3 days just to get a handle on it. And then, no more cases. They did a bunch of testing. So I just feel so lucky. I wear a mask when I go to the hospital, but, you know, that's it. You know, we don't have to wear masks, and we just basically don't have any cases. Which is just amazing.
That's fantastic. I think that we will look back on just the reaction from different countries and different plans of action. And I'm definitely watching. I have a cousin in Australia, and I watch her stories where she's like going to the pool and there's all these people there. I mean, it's also summer there, which is really inviting as well.
But they didn't let us, like, you're not allowed to just have big parties and do, you know, there's still some restrictions, you know, on amounts. And if you're having a mob scene, they just shut it down straight away. So, because I think we looked at the European summer where everybody was just like, la la, you know, it doesn't feel, and then it was just all went bad. So,
Okay, so you also said that you're getting some training online. You have a yoga for older grownups going online?
Yes. Well, I've never put it online before, so that's very exciting. In this feverish frenzy before I had my surgery, I was like, I'm going to get this online. So I was videoing like a crazy woman, and I did it.
Good.
Yeah, and I had a friend just help me kind of clean it up. So that's ready to go, and that's exciting. And then I love my Yoga for Mental Health course online, because online is a really great way to do mental health. Some of my people participate fully in all the Zoom sessions. So there's like pre-recorded stuff that they have and lots of links and resources. But then there's, we do 5 sessions of 3 hours of Zoom to kind of go over it, ask questions, apply it. And some people kind of never appeared. They were there and listened in the background. Other people chose to do the whole thing in the recorded versions. And other people were right there up front. And it was interesting because they were free to come forward or not as much as they needed to. And that seemed to help them. That's
really nice. How long are those trainings?
Well, I have to do the specifics, but the older grownups will be longer. It's 5 weeks of, so you can, if you apply, you get all the videos and stuff, just go for them, from now. And then once I get my dates down, which will be somewhere in April, there will be 5 sessions of 3 hours for the mental health, yoga for mental health house. And I think there might be more like 10 sessions of 2 hours for the older grownups. I just have to get that completely sorted, how I'm going to make that happen. But it's a bit longer, which just ended up being big. Because the training goes through what you do in an older person's class. So there's like balance and strength and mobility and all that stuff. And then kind of what are the conditions of aging. And so there's all of that stuff. What do you do in a class? All those things. And then I got into this whole movement patterns thing because it's really a good teaching. It's about boiling down to teaching people the essential movement pattern underneath it. And if they can get that, then they can use that pattern in any other movement pattern. So like we talked about sit to stand. If you can do sit to stand correctly, you can also do Uttanasana, Utkatasana, and you know how to use your belly, pelvis, and legs really in a lot of different ways. So I think of that as a kind of fundamental movement pattern.
Oh, that's really fascinating. That makes a lot of sense.
I like it.
I'll make sure that we link to those trainings in our show notes.
Thank you. I'll figure it out. I just have to get through this week, and then hopefully my horizon will open up. I'll give you a link to what's going to happen.
That's amazing. I'm sure it'll be ready by the time this episode comes out. And I wanted to share, we wrote an article quite a while ago because of a mistake I made. I had posted in a yoga teacher group something like, hi, someone I'm working with wants to name their class something. They don't know what to call it, and they don't want to call it.
I remember that.
Do you remember this?
Yeah, no, well, I don't remember the mistake. I thought that was such a good idea because it was like, what the hell do we call our older grown-ups class?
Well, I said she doesn't want to call it yoga for seniors.
Yeah.
That was the mistake. Like there was there were all kinds of really good points, like why segregate these people? You know, lots of people who are in more experienced bodies can do anything someone else can do. And the general consensus was these people wanted their own class. Like they had requested it. They were like, we don't want to go to like your 20-year-old yoga class.
They don't.
No. Connected Yoga Teachers, I will link to the podcast and article that came out of this quote unquote mistake. And this goes along so well with episode 247, where I talk about how being wrong and making mistakes are all part of learning. So I'll also link to that episode.
That was really clear to me. They might join, like some of my older grownups then join my grownups class. They're sort of up for it and they're getting their confidence and they realize it's not that different. If they've got choices, they know they're confident enough to say, okay, that's enough.
Right.
But you're right. They want a class where it's about them.
Yeah.
And it's not geriatric stuff. You know, I mean, I love chair yoga and I don't ever want to detract from it because there's a point in people's lives where they are in a chair and they need to be in a chair to be safe and not fall over. And then there's a lot of yoga you can do in the chair that is tremendously beneficial. But that's not the yoga I'm teaching, but it's, I'm trying to keep everybody out of the chair. Not that there's anything wrong with being in the chair.
Right.
But they want that class.
Yeah.
So what was the mistake? Just that you got a bit of a backlash.
It was the way I first worded it. I just went in just saying, what's a better name than yoga for seniors? And I don't look back and think, oh gosh, I could have worded it differently. And I did go back and reword the post. It just was triggering for a lot of people. I think we have this anti-aging message coming through. And so it makes us afraid of becoming a senior, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I thought it was an interesting thing to explore all the different ways you could describe it. And, it was a really hard thing for me once I got to grownups, older grownups was easier. But I've always said, if someone said, the postmenopausal bus, I'm not sure if I'd want to run toward that bus to get on. And I'm like, hang on, are there other buses I can take? So I don't think we all need to be herded. Or in terms of mental health, do people say, do you teach a mental health yoga class? No. I think everyone has varying degrees of mental health. And I don't think people with mental health necessarily want to be herded together, or maybe they do. And then they go and take a class that is, trauma informed or for anxiety or whatever it is. But It's funny, we shouldn't be afraid.
Right. Like you don't call a class yoga for mental health. You don't teach that.
No, I don't.
Right. I think it would be like you could teach a workshop and it might be called something like yoga for resilience or something. And
that's right. Or I might teach a workshop that says yoga tools for mental health. I might do that. Like, I'm going to give you some stuff you can use, but everyone's welcome. You don't have to be up the tree at the moment to do that. You can just, because the poop hits the fan. Like, mental health is a spectrum. Mm-hmm. And the thing that people don't understand, I think, about mental health, they're shocked even with their physical health that they don't just get it for free. But people kind of get educated a bit that you need to do exercise. But I think people are really shocked when mental health isn't, fantastic all the time. And it's like, wait a second, what's wrong with me? And it's like, well, what were you expecting? You actually have to cultivate your mental health. You really have to actively participate in building resilience and building a kind of, maybe that positive psychology kind of stuff. It's doesn't just come for free. And having a few tools that you can use that you've learned with your teacher that you're really comfortable with, boy, do they help when it gets ugly. And it doesn't have to be you who has something wrong. Like, it could be your partner gets cancer, or your mother is dying, or, there's lots of things that are unavoidable in this world, or COVID happens.
Yeah, pandemic hits.
You're isolated, and the pandemic was just like, oh, okay. Right. Everyone gets hit from the side.
It's so true. I love that you're saying this is a spectrum. Our mental health is on a spectrum, and it changes and it varies, and there are things outside of us contributing to it that we can't control, and that's a great way to put it. That always somewhere we're on there. It's not like we're just in perfect mental health all the time.
No. That's right. That's the whole point of my course. So I'm only a yoga teacher and an occupational therapist that did some placements. I did, 16 weeks of placement in a mental health unit. That's the extent of my mental health training. But I tried to look things up about yoga for mental health, and there are great resources, but there's a lot of bullshit. 10 poses for anxiety, or
right.
This is the cure, and it's like, whose anxiety? Is it my 90-year-old grandmother? Is it mine? Or is it my 19-year-old daughter? Whose anxiety are you talking about? And where are they on the spectrum? Are they good today? Are they having a bad day? Are they in total mental health crisis? You're not going to offer the same things to that person. And so what I wanted to do was create a framework where people could understand what tools to use, when and why, kind of thing. And then you use whatever tools you want, because there's a ton of tools. So it isn't like, here are the things. It's more like understanding why yoga for mental health is hard. Because if it was easy, we'd all just sit down and meditate and life would be fantastic. No problem. But meditating is hard. Calming your breath is hard. And if you're in crisis and you've never learned anything before, then it's extra hard. Whereas if you've learned stuff before and you have a relationship with a teacher that you trust, then you are very resourced. Then you're in much better condition to handle what's happening.
What a gift to so many people, like the older grownups that you work with, or the yoga teachers out there who are working with those people. Thank you for doing this work.
Oh, thank you. I really I have this like feverish need to share it because it feels important. The other thing that's important, I think, for mental health for aging is, what's a sustainable practice? When you're giving someone a home practice and stuff, maybe 10, 20 minutes of something, that is huge if you can do that every day. Consistency is so important. So I think as teachers, we're trying to empower people in the class, but we're also trying to empower them to do home practice. Because as soon as they practice on their own at home, everything changes.
Yes. I like what you said, like whatever they can do. Like I'm thinking also of, busy parents. When my kids were little, I was lucky to get in a couple of poses and to sit in quiet some days, and that was it.
That's right.
Yeah.
But it's still really powerful. Like, that still changes your day.
It does.
I've been doing Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach's 40-day, it's a free meditation thing. It's really good. And my daughter and I did it already together, but we're kind of doing it again. and they chit chat for 5 minutes kind of on a theme, and we're already sitting kind of in meditation, and then you meditate for 5 more minutes. And that little 10 minutes, we both say, my daughter and I, it completely changes the day.
Right. Is it on an app?
It's on Sounds True.
Oh, okay.
Sounds True, and it's free, 40-day. I think you probably get their newsletter by the once you've done it, you can always. I also thought it was a really good introduction to meditation. So they talk about different anchors, in the present, like to anchor your breath or anchor to your body. And I thought it was very, very effective and really, really excellent.
So if our yoga teachers want to learn more, they'll go to yogaforgrownups.com.
That's right. Yeah. Well, my Instagram is Yoga for Grownups. So I haven't been posting much at the moment, but I do try to post something useful when I post something. So I'm too old to be fabulous and sort of, doing.
Your Instagram is fabulous. Oh my gosh. I love your Instagram.
So, yes, it's not sort of beautiful me on a cliff doing something, but, it's a little more.
It is beautiful you. Maybe the cliff isn't there. But I was really intrigued when you were posting from the hospital with your yoga mat there. And you were like, I'm just going to get down to the yoga mat.
Oh, my gosh. That was the best thing ever. The hospital beds were very soft, and I sleep on a very, very firm bed. And I just felt like I was getting sucked into a marshmallow.
All right.
And so I had my daughter bring me in a yoga mat, and I got down on the floor with permission, because I had to tell the nurses, because if they find you on the floor, they freak out.
Right.
And I just, to lie on the floor and to just feel the firmness and be able to move a little bit there was really good.
Oh, that's so nice. Well, it's very inspiring. Well, thank you so much for this, Maria. It's been fantastic to chat with you, and I'm excited for our connected yoga teachers to reach out to you if they have questions about this type of yoga.
Well, thank you. They're welcome to do that. And thank you, Shannon. You always make it so easy. So that's lovely. Thank you.
Connected yoga teachers, I want to hear from you. What were your key takeaways? What did you learn from Maria today? I feel like there was so much in this episode. And one of the things that really sticks out for me after listening back to the audio, it goes along with really missing Maria and feeling like her teachings were really needed in the world and are still needed in the world. So I'm excited that she did work to put things online. But one of the key takeaways for me was I just had this excitement around the tools of yoga that Maria was talking about. And after the episode, I really wrote some notes here to myself. And one of them was, we are not providing the recipe and the outcome for every single student that we meet. Instead, we offer the ingredients as tools that might help, that they might want to add to their daily life, to their practice. We offer suggestions and ideas, and then each individual person is making their own unique recipe using tools that they learn from us as yoga teachers, along with many other things offered in the world. I think another big key takeaway for me was that Maria didn't say that we need to know every single condition that a body with more experience will have, but that we also don't have to avoid talking about them. And I think that's really key, that when we have conditions that we face as the body ages, I think information is empowering. Maria talked about different books and resources as well, and those are all in our show notes over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/249, which means that next week we are coming up to episode 250. I cannot believe it, Connected Yoga Teachers. Next week, I am going to be sharing my own thoughts on belly breathing and how I really changed my cues as a yoga teacher from what I learned in yoga teacher training, what I was teaching, and then as I learned more and more about pelvic health and how the body works and how the breath works, I started to really change how I was teaching breath. And so I wanted to share this. It goes along really well with my episode where I was talking about mistakes and being wrong as a yoga teacher. And so I thought I would share another example of that because a lot of you have commented that that episode has really helped you and you learned a lot from it. So here is to continuous learning, as well as I feel like doing this episode with Maria really made me think about how hard she worked at putting her quote unquote legacy together, her life's work. She was really working to get that out into the world. And of course, when we are faced with losing a friend, a loved one, we learn very quickly about the precious aspect, what feels like short aspect sometimes of life. And I hope that this inspires you to do the work that you love, to teach what you love, to maybe put something together that can really help to serve people when you're not doing that work. I also want to give a huge shout out of thank you to our entire team over here. A few of them I messaged about how difficult it was to just queue up this audio to listen to. And they, you know what, this team over here, they're amazing at supporting me and supporting all of you with the work that they're doing behind the scenes. They're unbelievable. Thank you, Suzanne, Crunch, Sinead, and Erica. And thank you for being here, dear listener, all the way to the very end. It's been fun to hang out, and it means so much to me. I am grateful each and every day that I get to share with you on this podcast. And I'm curious, what are you going to be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?